Everybody, and welcome to episode number 4 of our series, Not Another Demo. We are pleased this week to have with us Ben and Chad from Vectra. Of course, as always, I've got Lloyd and Aaron with me here as well. As I would hope, as we're at episode 4 now, that people would know that this is really our attempt at changing the conversation away from, your typical marketing slide decks into having a more real conversation with the vendor of understanding what they do and why you should spend some time talking with them and how they can help your organization. So with that, Ben, I'm going to pass it over to you and let you start some introductions on your side, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. And yeah, appreciate you guys having us today. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Ben Staperfenne. I'm the account manager, account rep here for Vectra based in Michigan. Been with Vectra about 7 months now, in the cybersecurity industry, about 4 years now, selling in the Grand Rapids market. So thanks again for having us.
Absolutely. Shad, you want to introduce yourself to the throngs of people?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, my name is Shad Gunderson. Again, thanks for having us on today. I am the security engineer for the Ohio Valley. Have been at Vectra for about 3 years, and live just to the south of the Michigan border, near Cedar Point, if anybody's been to that spot.
Do you take the boat that you're on from to the lake from time to time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, feasibly could get to Grand Rapids by water.
Looks like a pretty nice day out on the sea there. So why don't you guys, let's get started with, give us just if I was to say, tell us why someone should take a meeting with Vectra. Why should someone spend some time with you guys? Let's start by just answering that question.
Sure. So I'll give you the kind of the 10,000 foot view, and then, we can kind of talk into more detail as you see fit. So Vectra, we are a network detection and response vendor, cybersecurity company. And really when we talk with customers, potential customers, prospects, et cetera, we typically find kind of 3 or 4 key areas that we see where, they have challenges or we're currently helping them with, with our current deployments. Like every cybersecurity vendor, right, first and foremost is reducing the risk of breach. And we do that, and our approach to it is really through the view of the network, right? And so our goal is to take potential incidents or incidents that we know are occurring out there and reduce the potential dwell time to keep them from becoming major incidents or breaches, right? Second is really improving the efficiency of the SOC, right? So we do that in a couple different ways. I know it's been talked about that Gartner triad, right? So we do that through integration with current security investments, so to strengthen the posture that's already out there. In addition to that, we also help by reducing the amount of critical network alerts that a SOC team has to go and sift through and investigate and remediate. And I think we can have Shad kind of talk about our behavior-based approach to network detection. And then kind of 3 and 4 are, from a compliance perspective, right? We have a lot of customers in highly regulated industries using Vectra, as a compliance protocol, a compliance check. And then, even more so now, and even more so with things happening in the world as organizations start to more aggressively, shift workloads past the perimeter to the cloud, taking that same network view and that network visibility story to those cloud workloads. So that's really kind of at a high level, how we've been, the conversations we've been having. And again, every organization based on industry and maturity, typically have, one of those 4 buckets, usually a combination of kind of current challenges that they're looking to address.
So what are the different data points that you ingest to do your magic?
Yeah, I'll take that. So we are an NDR vendor, so network detection and response. Our stance up until very recently was that we would, strictly take the network as our source of signal. We've adapted that outlook with the pervasiveness of cloud workloads and really the somewhat lacking capabilities of getting full visibility of what happens with traffic that sometimes may not even hit a traditional network so to speak. So, but in operation, we will ingest full packets and take them directly off the wire data, and then reduce that to a metadata format, which is searchable, and also use that same metadata format for generating detections of behavior that we see as advanced attacker behavior.
So when you say that, right, you have the traditional, your traditional on-prem network, so Fortinet, checkpoint, stuff like that. So you're ingesting data from those systems. How are you ingesting the information from the cloud?
Right. So we are a sensor-based technology, right? So in an on-prem network, we're deploying either physical or virtual sensors that give us a view into, at a simplistic level, a span or a tap port off of a router or switch at a key junction point.
Okay, so you don't need to necessarily hook up with like a checkpoint or that. You can go right into Cisco equipment, Juniper equipment, Palo Alto, stuff like that.
Correct. Yeah, we don't need anything other than a managed switch capability in order to deploy. Now in ever complex, in enterprise environments, of course, there are lots of things in that environment that we need to play with. So firewalls, IDS, even AV, EDR, and those sorts of things are all certainly something that we cooperate with. But for our own purposes, we need packets, and that at a basic level is off again a port monitor or a tap infrastructure if that's available. If you're fancy and you have Ixia or Gigamon, then we're happy to sit off of that. So in the cloud environment, I think is where you were asking, that's somewhat different. And there is a capability that exists in today's IaaS platforms that allow us to get port mirroring within AWS and soon to be Azure, as they've pushed back the availability of that. And not just ourselves, but a lot of other vendors are kind of sitting waiting on that functionality, because really the only other option in that environment is to put yet another agent on each of these cloud workloads to get that packet visibility. And that's something that we've learned most people aren't interested in doing, managing, or honestly, absorbing the additional cost for that.
Like a traditional CASB, right? Is you still, you're not funneling all the traffic into Zscaler or, whatever you're using. You're doing connection points on Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, stuff like that, and then funneling that data back.
What we're doing is we are explicitly looking for attacker behavior, originating or destined for those environments, rather than the CASB play, which is security as a whole, or maybe compliance as a whole. We're really specifically looking for those advanced attackers that are moving laterally, or in this case, out to the cloud environment to maybe pull valuable assets or exfil from that environment.
Now, are you sharing data with like other systems? Do you have, you got your secret sauce, right? Your logic that makes you better than other people, for better or for worse. But are you getting data from external sources like, like Talos and Shodan and like all the,
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So in some cases, we can absolutely use threat feeds to help augment what we do. But in operation for detection, at least within the Vectra solution, there isn't a lot of reliance on external data sources. So what we do is we will deploy baseline on the network for 7 to 10 days. And in that time, there's about 40 or so different algorithms that are looking for specific different behaviors across the kill chain, or for specific MITRE attack mappings. And in this, we leverage both supervised and unsupervised machine learning. So out of the box, those algorithms which happen to rely upon supervised machine learning already come trained. So a good example of that is a port scan, you know, reconnaissance behavior looks similar on, you know, my network as it does any other network, right? It's hit you know, a certain number of hosts in a certain number of time on a certain number of hosts, or a certain number of ports, and those sorts of things. Now, for behaviors such as exfil and command and control, those are things that we rely upon unsupervised learning on to help learn the patterns of your network, and make those detections, you know, far more meaningful, far more valuable, and less prone to, you know, false positive or false negative sort of alerting. So that's.
So can you explain a little bit more when you say supervised and unsupervised? So for us Vectra newbies, what does it mean to be supervised and unsupervised?
Oh man. Okay. So we could go AI all day, but in general, supervised machine learning is that which is accomplished through the use of training sets or you know, information that you feed into an algorithm to essentially show it what it is that it is looking for, in our case on the wire, right? So that's a good example of that, again, is the sort of traffic that might trigger from a port scan or a port sweep, and things of that nature. Now, unsupervised machine learning is that which requires input essentially from your network. So it isn't, or observe traffic on the wire and then establish a baseline from which, you know, to work. So just kind of at a general level, that's the major difference.
All right.
We use a multitude of machine learning and AI techniques, and that is something that sets us apart, is that we're not necessarily all bought into a single technique or a single, you know, approach to this, and because each algorithm is looking for a specific behavior, you know, it gives us some flexibility and some capabilities there.
Okay, so that's, I mean, for people that would be interested in your product, that's the biggest thing that you want to point out to them, right? Is like the importance of a baseline. Now, you said you could get an actionable baseline as little as 7 days. Is there something where would you want it to go longer? Because obviously, you know, the more data you have, the better your baseline is. But understanding that, you know, absolutely, I can't really give you 60 days to gather data, you know, because your product is costing me money now. So what is right, kind of the, you know, that sweet spot?
Well, so I mean, the thing is that once those baselines are established, the algorithm will continue to learn, right? So it continually, you know, morphs, modifies, learns, and you know, continues to become more accurate and effective. Now, you know, to the question, you know, absolutely, you know, you want to show value quickly, and you know, 7 to 10 days, and that's in a POC environment, right? That's, you know, we drop a box fresh on the network, and that's, you know, typically, you know, how long it takes to get start seeing detections generated from those algorithms that are unsupervised.
Okay, one other follow-up question, then I'll be quiet and let Lloyd and Matt talk.
We've just been letting you go, man. You're on.
So obviously, you know, behavior analytics, and especially UEBA, and we're doing acronyms, and we're doing a bad job, Matt, of reminding people what acronyms are.
I thought that was your job.
Oh, it is normally, but I haven't got a chance to eat yet, so I'm still a little groggy. You know, end user behavior analytics. What's the difference between, and again, you know, we're speaking at high level, between like behavioral analytics as your network as a whole, understanding that most of that traffic is being driven by users. So, I mean, I see a lot of times, and again, this is where I get a little bit harder questions for you. And I do this with every vendor, so don't take any offense, Ben. Is, you know, like I did a webinar with like Chris Roberts last week, and he was beating up the security vendors and champion AI a lot, right? Like just because you have you fuzzing this and ML this and wanting that extra next step, is your guys' system able to understand the difference between, you know, this is general traffic that's happening because we do batch files, you know, at 6 p.m. every day, as opposed to the bad guys are getting smart and learning, and I know that I spearfished a marketing individual and they're going to be 9 to 5, but maybe every Thursday they do, you know, lots of emails out to different people. So what's the difference between those different behavioral data sets, right? And how do you guys distinguish between those? Am I butchering that one? Because I want to see what the difference you guys do with AI as machine learning, knowing that basically AI is kind of fuzzy right now.
It is. And honestly, it's been a challenge for us as vendors because everyone uses AI and ML indiscriminately.
Mm-hmm.
And no one really explains any of what this is supposed to mean or supposed to do. But what we use machine learning for is to automate the type of behaviors that an analyst would do manually looking at network data.
Thank you. I was hoping you do honesty, because that was a double-edged question. So.
Yeah, we're not Skynet. We're not trying to. I mean, although we're approaching that with orchestration tools. But in reality, what we're trying to do is make the analyst's job easier,
mm-hmm.
less repetitive. You look at failed logins to determine, patterns, right? But that doesn't have to be a human. It could be a automated algorithm that says, hey, out of these 10,000 failed logins, these 400 are of some interest, and of these 400, these 10 you should be most interested in. And the idea there is to center in and direct those analysts and investigators to to fruitful investigations, and to cut down on the time that they spend chasing sequential alerts out of an IDS or a firewall, or out of a SIEM tool, right?
Right, because I mean that's the importance, because I mean our company, we've a fairly mature SOC. We have a pretty decent SIM, but obviously there's still alert fatigue. We colleagues at Target that we know and love dearly, that they still dealing with tons of alerts, and understanding that you're trying to do the AI like first level chatbots, right? Like in essence, you're kind of trying to do chatbots, so we have customer service that, we're pushing AI to answer basic questions and then triage stuff. And then with Amazon Lexbox, they're trying to take that next step. And how do you get your ML to the point where you can emulate like a tier 2 tech, right? That's just as important in your space, because knowing the cost of how much the SIMs cost. Like Splunk's pretty decent. Is Splunk cheap? No.
Nope.
So as a healthcare system, I have to be mindful of budget, especially going into the second half of this year, even into 2021. Are you able to sell your tool, this functionality, right, as something to augment driving down SIM costs, or is it's kind of just is what it is right now? Because to your point, taking that next step with ML is going to be hard. Like the companies that get it right are going to be light years ahead of other people.
Right. Well, so what I would say to that is, we're not going to make it any cheaper to operate Splunk. In fact, if you're looking at the SOC triad, we're actually adding data to that repository, right? So more money. But what we will do is make sure that the data that gets in there is useful and actionable for you,
okay.
And that the sorts of detections that come out of Vectra will allow you to then triangulate against data that's in your SIM and also in your EDR. So, the idea here is that you get a notification or get an alert that there's something happening on the network. And of course, what do you want to do from there as an investigator? Well, first of all, after understanding what happened on the network, you want to, probably pop into that host and take a look at the process table, maybe see what is communicating on, on a port that a hidden tunnel was detected on, those sorts of things, right? And so that's really the goal here, is fleshing that out and making the other two, legs of the table more solid and more effective.
Good.
Yeah, we
I
need
have
to
IT questions, but I'm going to be quiet and let my colleagues talk.
Yeah, we need to have a whole conversation around that new triad that's out there.
I want, it's that honesty of, like, you answered it perfectly. You said, like, this is going to add more data, but if you can do things with it, it's,
Right, data.
times
Yep.
where you don't tell them that hidden cost, right? Because to Matt's point, this is where we want to get vendors to, speak more truthful. It's almost like I almost have more respect if you tell me, like, talk about things you do. And if you suck at this, tell me you suck at it, right? So then I don't plan for it, because a lot of times,
Right.
and Lloyd and I have dealt with this in some of the major security projects lately, is it's sold this way. And yep, marketing guys do that. But we assume that, hey, we can also use it for this. But when we get into the project and everything else, you're like, well, wait a minute, what about this functionality? And then you get one of two things. Well, that's a beta, or, hey, you're one of the first people to use it. Or, well, that's not working well. And my frustration is that honesty comes later on in the project, and it has downstream impact, where if you would have been upfront with me in the project, then I could have planned for it, right? Like, don't cause your company consternation later on, when you could just be up front and say, hey, we do this awesome, we don't do this. And that's why I appreciated you to say, we're not going to make your Splunk instance cheaper. Like, there's a lot of power in you being honest about that.
Sadly, some of that truth comes out after the PO and everything else is already done too, right? And that's, in all honesty, when with my role at Optiv, 99% of the time when I see a company that's ripping out one product and replacing another product, it's customer service and the sales process. It's almost never, virtually almost never just a technical issue. It's almost always, hey, they lied to us about this, or they never respond to this, or I only see the sales team when they're, they need to sell me the next
Get the
thing.
check.
So, yeah. So to that point, can you guys talk a little bit about the experience of being a Vectra customer, post-sales even, right? And let's talk a little bit about, what it looks like to go through the POC process with you guys, but also talk about, as a company, how do you guys handle your clients post-sales?
Yeah, so we have a dedicated customer success team that also includes Shad and I, right? So that's part of the value. And to Aaron's point about making sure that we're upfront with what we're saying during the beginning process, we're the ones, marshaling that engagement post PO and all that. So making sure that we're kind of right sizing it out of the gate is only in our best interest as well, because we're, helping for the caring and feeding for the customer. But alongside kind of the pre-sales team, right, we have a customer success team that not only helps pick up the deployment, but then works with, the technical team and the analyst team to kind of, build, certainly knowledge from a training, right? A lot of times we see when we do the POVs, right, and then not coming back to a deployment for several months, right? All that mind share is gone, and you're basically learning the product all over again, right? So making sure that we kind of reintroduce, what we're doing and how we're doing it, and then helping those analysts get kind of a fundamental understanding of, how they're going to interact with the Vectra platform going forward. And then, building that operational cadence, right, with the leadership team, the business folks that brought in the technology, that, making sure that we're aligned to, why they initially did it, and then secondarily, not even secondarily, but alongside that, with the operational team that's going to be utilizing the technology to make sure that we're, still aligned with what they're intended to use it was for, and making sure that, we're all on the same page going forward.
So does that include
like answer for you, Matt?
Yeah, pretty good. Does that include the customer success? Because that's becoming a coin phrase too. So does that include, monthly, what sort of cadence, or, like proactive cadence, right? Because if I'm a consumer of your product, I can always put in a support ticket. I can always pick up the phone. I can, right? But I guess is there a scheduled cadence? Go a little deeper is what I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can take that. Really, the customer success is really kind of that quarterly business review after the initial deployment, right? It's not a lot of heavy management or that sort of thing. However, there's a caveat there. There are a number of customers that take advantage of our Sidekick service, which essentially is a MSP or may also already have an MSP where they would consume Vectra data. So that could increase based on sort of the level or interest in having that reporting provided back to them. But in general, the post deployment, it's on a quarterly basis, and add as needed if there's any issues or those sorts of things that pop up. But
does that include things like just ensuring that people know how they're using the product? Do you guys typically do training? Is there, hey, let's take a look, health checks, making sure you're getting all the value out of the investment, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's health checks. It's education. It is integrations with third-party systems. So making sure that once you get up and deployed, at least from a Vectra perspective, that you're able to then interact with your EDR. So there's an integration that allows you to pivot into Crowdstrike to do an investigation. There's also an integration that allows you to isolate or block through Crowdstrike through an API call. So these are sorts of things that we can turn on and enable within within the deployment to automate things. So that's all part of the process.
So you mentioned Crowdstrike, and that brings me to my next favorite topic: security solutions that have been an island unto themselves for a long time. Can you talk a little bit?
Wait, what do you mean for me? What does it mean on an island on their own? Like they were like the big leaders
integrated with everything else, so. To me, if I'm helping someone put together a security portfolio, I want to be sure that the different things that they're putting together, investments that they're making, can communicate with each other, have APIs that can connect to each other.
Okay.
If you're part of the the security triad, you certainly should be able to talk with the EDR and the SIM solutions that are out there, right? Otherwise, you kind of break that triangle. So can you guys talk a little bit about Vectra in terms of the broader security space and how you interact with other tools that are out there?
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting about us is that we very early on decided that we wanted to do one thing and one thing well. And we also kind of came up at the beginning of orchestration technology as well, and we recognized that it wasn't going to be our place to really necessarily try and build connector factories and integrations with every single security tool out there. Now that being said, we have a very open approach to taking data in. And also being accessible to third-party solutions. The entire solution can be managed over REST. Never really would even have to open up a web browser if you didn't want to. And conversely, getting data out of it is really one of the main use cases, is to get that network metadata to a usable repository, be that Elastic or be that Hadoop or be that Splunk. Right. So getting that out via syslog, via Kafka, and those sorts of things has been something that we've done from the get-go. So for us, we really wanted to plug into a security architecture in one spot. We wanted to be the detection engine. We want to be the host scoring engine, and then help analysts then, based on that information, be able to do something, actionable.
So you mentioned the integration with Crowdstrike from from being able to click and go in and do some research there. Are there other EDR players that you guys have current integration or that are on the
road? Absolutely. So we've announced a number of integrations over the last couple of years. Some EDR platforms are a little more accessible than others, but from that perspective, CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, SentinelOne, and the Microsoft technologies are all out of the box integration and available for use. So and we're working towards many of the other EDR platforms getting fully integrated as well.
Do you think there's an appetite to start open sourcing parts of that? And when I say open sourcing, meaning like one of the biggest complaints last week in the virtual healthcare security webinar we had was the fact that vendors need to figure out a way to communicate better, have a good baseline, and then you have your own niche, right? But some of the frustrations that some people had, and I know Matt remembers Chris went off on this one, I mean, is that like everything should be able to communicate with each other, right? But it's going to take an industry as a whole to figure out, okay, this is the API that all of us going to use.
Right.
Do you think there's an appetite for that? Or does it, like Matt said, we're still in that island unto itself, and I don't want to let anybody maybe partially play in my playground, even though it might be better for all of security and maybe better for my product because I could expand into other areas. But I just, I made $1.7 billion or whatever a year, and I don't want anybody coming in and touching my stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, as a startup, we knew that we needed to play in the sandbox with others, right? We weren't going to be the big kid out of the box. So that was something we, from the get-go. Absolutely, I think there's an appetite for that. I think that the language doesn't exist yet, and that's really why you're seeing the prevalence of orchestration tools, Demisto, well, basically Splunk and Palo Alto now, right? That's really filled that gap. But I mean, it's definitely something that is on the horizon and important. But I think it's also what context do you pass from the network to the EDR to make it valuable for the EDR, right? Probably the host name, probably those sorts of things. But like I said, I think that the language is a little, has yet to be really fleshed out as far as that goes.
So you've mentioned
it was not an easy question to answer, so thank you.
So we've talked about SOAR briefly a couple of times here, or at least it's come up.
SOAR, Matt?
Well done. I don't know. Orchestration and automation. Get caught in my own trap. That was good, Aaron. Thanks. Security orchestration and automation.
There you go.
I could do it. Anyways, I think what we're seeing, at least, or what I'm seeing a lot of in West Michigan, is that while companies are talking a lot about orchestration automation, they maybe don't have a solution that's specific on that. Some of the ones that you just mentioned, right? And so can you talk a little bit about, some of the automation that you have built in, a little bit more? Let's talk about what your capabilities are there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's I guess what you would consider full integration where our platform leverages the published API for a CrowdStrike or Carbon Black, or for maybe even a Palo Alto firewall or a checkpoint firewall to implement some sort of block or deny rule. But that doesn't necessarily have to completely exist. There's a lot of integration that we've done that has just been through Python scripting and some tooling like that. So this doesn't have to be as complex as deploying an entire SOAR platform, there are wins that can be had. One of the kind of low-hanging fruit integrations that we've done is we are able to produce a score of a host's threat and certainty, and we're able to then, based on that threat and certainty level, create a real-time block list that a firewall can subscribe to, and pretty much any modern firewall could subscribe to a block list on a URL, right? And just reentrantly load that on on an interval basis, and that's a quick and easy. How do you keep command and control, or how do you cut off command and control from internal systems to outside systems once you've detected? That's a quick hit. So it doesn't have to be a full playbook in Phantom or Demisto terms. Now, obviously, as this matures in your organization, you're going to want to have multiple step, multi-phase decision tree stuff. So I mean, it very quickly can get there, but for simple block, deny, isolate, those sorts of things, it's easily doable.
Well, because you bring up a good point, right? Like, I know even as an analyst, you bring up the term playbook and we cringe a little bit, but but that is important, right? Because you need to be able to, if you want to mature, fine tune and mature everything, you also need to understand your baseline with the tool, right? Like when you see this, you normally do this, and you can grow it and you can mature it later. But you bring up a good point on like why that is so important, even though that playbooks, wasting time. Like some will say, oh, it's a waste of time. The chances of that incident happening are this much. And guess what? Next month you read about something. This company got breached by that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we got just a few minutes here. Lloyd, you've been awfully quiet, so I don't know. He usually comes in with the grenades at the end.
This time I can't though. You guys nailed all my questions. I was going to ask about operational impact, the implementing your solution. That single pane. I think Matt, you asked that question when you're dealing with communications between systems, ensuring that the integration is there, and that we can leverage other systems to enhance our data set and do response. And then vendor lock-in, which I think you touched on as far as what you can export your data into other systems for. So I don't have a grenade on this one, Matt, unfortunately.
I like vendor lock-in. I'm going to start using that phrase. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So Ben, Chad, anything that we didn't cover that you guys want to get out to the community right now about Vectra?
Yeah, so I guess, shameless plug, Gartner recently released this week, I believe, their market guide for NDR. So this was a space that we're, very proud of kind of helping define out there. So if you're a Gartner subscriber, or if you want to go to our website, you can, check register box and go ahead and read that. Some really good information about the landscape and just some recommendations on how they would, how they recommend kind of deploying this type of technology. And so I think, and then we also, I know we talked a little bit about the POV process, and obviously in the world we are today, getting boxes on site and things are challenging at best. So, I don't know, Shad, if you want to maybe touch on a little bit some of the other things we're doing to kind of show potential customers value in some of these, cloud labs and workshops that we've been able to, put together, and, again, kind of still show the power of a network detection solution without being in the network.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even in some cases deploying perhaps a sensor, which is pretty low, low touch, low resource intensive to get data from your network into a cloud environment. So yeah, there are a couple options ranging from an attack workshop, which is really stepping through what an advanced attacker does in the process of executing an attack, to a more red team focused or capture the flag focused activity, and kind of at the far end of that is standing up a kind of a an environment that is available to that potential customer to test in, and even perhaps even providing some of their own, if they've got an area of the network that they can get visibility to or get access to, that they would forward to us, performing detection on that traffic. So kind of ranging, again, trying to be flexible, especially in these times.
I think we have one of these events coming up here in a couple of days, right? So yeah,
absolutely.
Correct.
I'll go after that. So, all right. Well, I think we're just about out of time. So Ben, Chad, I really appreciate you guys doing this. The open conversation and the candor and the honesty, I think is critical, moving forward in the world of security. So again, our thanks. We appreciate the support that you guys always provide to the CSA here in West Michigan. And everyone that's watching, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff that I always ask everyone to do. So with that, we'll see y'all later. Thanks for watching.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again, guys.